So, I know it's probably hard to tell, but I might like the Archie Sonic comic. Really, from the moment Ian Flynn was brought on as its head writer in issue 160, it became one of my favorite stories. But during Flynn's time at Archie, that wasn't the only comic he worked on. No, about 5 years after starting on Sonic, he was given the opportunity to work on another adaptation of a video game franchise, Mega Man. Naturally, with my fondness for Flynn's work and the fact that Mega Man crosses over with the Sonic comic itself, reading it was a no-brainer. However, there is one problem. I don't really know anything about Mega Man. I mean, I didn't know that much about Sonic stories either, but I'd at least played a bunch of the games. But with Mega Man, I hadn't touched any of the main games except the very first one, and I just wasn't sure if it would be built for a newcomer like me. Way more than that though, I was concerned about the comic's ending. Because though I didn't know how Archie Mega Man wrapped up, I knew that it went on an indefinite hiatus. And the last thing I wanted was to get invested in a comic that never gets a satisfying conclusion. But then I got up to the first crossover during my read through of Sonic and screw it. It's time to rock and roll, baby. Let's do it. Wow, this is really good. An experience that both fans of Mega Man and outsiders like me can enjoy. It's one of those stories where the more I read, the more I was left surprised by the fact that it's so underappreciated. I mean, I barely ever see anyone talk about this. I can't help but feel like there's so much more to say, so many people who would love this comic if only they knew more about it. Which is exactly why I want to talk about Archie Mega Man today. About the Mega Man comic that deserves to be remembered. But first, this video is sponsored by Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a fantastic program focused on teaching back-end development in the Python and Go programming languages. Now, I've tried my hand at coding before, and my biggest problem has always been that I end up feeling kind of directionless or losing interest, and that's where Boot.dev comes in. See, their goal is to gamify learning, making the whole thing feel like a captivating RPG, getting you to actually go hands-on with the code yourself while gaining XP, levels, achievements, and completing quests, even competing on global leaderboards. Basically, they've made the whole process both digestible and entertaining. Beyond that, they offer a 30-day no questions asked refund policy, and much of the content is free to watch as a guest if you either can't afford the membership currently or just want to test things out before paying. So click my link in the description and use code LOWART to get 25% off your first month or even your first entire year if you choose an annual plan at boot.dev. Thank you to them for sponsoring, and thank you for watching. Now, back to Mega Man. In the world of Mega Man, everything can be traced back to a couple of old men, Dr. Light and Dr. Wily, both of them genius innovators and inventors responsible for evolving robotics. But where Dr. Light is rightfully celebrated for creating machines integral to modern living in this universe, Wily is different. See, though Light is given a military contract and builds weapons for the government, to him, that's nothing more than a means to an end. His ultimate goal is to progress and better humanity with his skills, and he views these weapons as nothing more than a stain on his life's work. But Wily? Well, Wily takes a certain glee in weaponizing his creations, and where Light has a powerful sentimentality for his inventions, Wily sees them as little more than tools spawned from his brilliant mind. If being the best means outfitting his creations with the latest and most violent of biological weapons, then so be it. And yet that drive is exactly what gets Wily banned from working in the field of robotics when he goes too far, creating a machine that even the military views with disgust and disdain. But in Wily's mind, he didn't do anything wrong here. He simply made the greatest weapon he could. So why is it that Light gets all the glory? Which is exactly where the comic begins. See, Dr. Light is unveiling a line of robot masters capable of helping the world in even bigger and better ways due to their advanced AI. Though Wily has been instrumental in their creation, Light keeps him backstage. After all, having someone as controversial as him at this announcement would only hurt the robot masters' reputations, planting a seed of doubt about these great inventions before they're even able to start their work, which makes a lot of sense. At the same time though, how wouldn't this enrage Wily? Without him, this never would have happened. And if the world isn't going to put his name in the history books like he deserves, then he'll have to write it there himself. And so he changes all the Robot Masters' programming and unleashes them on the city, violently destroying the very world they were built to help. Right away, Wily is a ton of fun. The type of gloating, megalomaniac villain whose magnetic energy can't help but entertain. His over-the-top speeches, crazy poses, and menacing smiles. All of it adds together to create a monster who, despite some understandable motivations, is so ridiculously evil. Contrasting him with Light only makes this more engaging. A good-hearted man, a humble genius, and a loving father, forced into confrontation with a man who only cares about himself. Naturally though, with all the Robot Masters corrupted by Wily, now someone is going to need to step up to defeat them. And who else would be fit for that job but Mega Man? Except, here's the thing, he isn't. Not really, anyway. Mega Man, or Rock as he's originally known, is not built for combat. In fact, after a terrible failure with a prior creation, Light vowed to keep advanced AI separate from weapons, and eventually promised to stop building weapons altogether. As such, Rock is made to be a son through and through. He's truly just a good-hearted boy who spends his days helping his father in the lab and hanging out with his sister Roll. So when Rock sees what's happening, when he sees his father's distress, he steps up to the plate not out of obligation, but out of compassion. He can't stand to see people hurt, can't stand to see his father upset. And so, without any other option, Dr. Light does what he vowed to never do again. He weaponizes his son. And though this transformation into Mega Man is treated as suitably exciting, the true start to this action-adventure comic, the thing I immediately found most interesting about it were the implications. After all, how would this kind of kid react to fighting, to destroying other robots like him? And this is what I find most engaging about Flynn's approach in this first arc. Because while Flynn faithfully adapts the plot of the first Mega Man game, he also leans into the darkness inherent to this premise to pull out conflict and emotion. So yes, each defeat of a Robot Master is depicted with striking paneling, fantastic art, and energetic action, but we also see Rock slowly growing disillusioned. He started this to help, but all he's really doing is destroying, and he hates that. The good heart his father programmed into him might have set him on this path in the first place, but now he can't make sense of this destruction. So he begins to cope, gloating as he breaks apart these robots until finally, Light becomes so concerned with his change in personality that he teleports him back to the lab, and Rock loses it, firing at the cage Light has put around him. But then he immediately stops and breaks down, regretting this outburst as soon as it's over. And so Light releases him and, "I made you in my image. I built your heart and gave you eyes. I gave you power and a sense of justice beyond any compare. I gave you hands, a child's face, robot hair. But this burden, this burning in your heart, I did not put there." And this scene, it's shockingly quick, maybe even anticlimactic, but that's actually part of what I like about it. If Rock had truly gone off the deep end, I don't know that I could have found it all that believable, at least not with only a couple issues of buildup. But when it's reframed as nothing more than a desperate tantrum, when all he needed was his father to remind him that he is good, that it's only natural he would feel conflicted, well, it gives me a glimpse of their family dynamic, of the love between them, of the love that anchors Rock's good nature, allowing me to get invested in the premise of the story on a level I hadn't expected this early. It's a striking depiction of the differences between Wily and Light, and how what Wily views as a weakness is really often Light's greatest strength. From here, Mega Man faces the rebuilt Robot Masters again, but now his approach is different. Instead of fighting, he talks. He tells them that working for Wily was never what they were meant to do, that they can be something different, that they can be reprogrammed. However, the fact remains that the Robot Masters don't have the luxury of true free will. If Wily told them to destroy Mega Man, well, then they'll have to destroy Mega Man, even if they don't want to. So, they do. As Mega Man fights a copy that Wily created, they destroy a Mega Man, saving him from a stalemate and fighting their programming through a clever loophole in Wily's logic. From there, Mega Man handily defeats Wily using the weapons he's procured from the other Robot Masters, and now, with his father's gentle reminder, he won't lose his way again. His kindness even leading him to reach out to Wily the moment he's been beaten, offering him a helping hand. Overall, I thoroughly enjoy this arc. It's a strong start to the comic as a whole, offering plenty of action and spectacle, while still giving a glimpse at the heart of the series, at the relationship between Rock and Dr. Light. And then there's the Mega Man 2 adaptation. Yeah, I'm not as much of a fan of this one. Mainly, it suffers from feeling far too similar to the first arc. After all, Rock once again has to fight Robot Masters, confront Wily, and yeah, this sure feels like a by-the-book video game adaptation. Exactly the type of thing I initially worried about. The comic is just struggling to find a novel story here. I mean, since we already saw that Rock won't lose his way while he fights these robots again, what's the conflict now? Well, Wily is corrupting his programming as he defeats Robot Masters, so yeah, the core of this is a less character-based retread of the first arc. That first arc also had a pacing problem, an understandable one when adapting an entire game into 4 issues, but a problem nonetheless. For example, the Robot Masters, each fight would just be a couple pages and then BAM! Defeated. Then the endgame was crammed into a single issue with Mega Man one-shotting the Yellow Devil, and the dragon in this adaptation doesn't fare much better. I could overlook these pacing problems in those issues because I at least had a character hook to keep me invested, but here, there isn't really anything like that. The fights are mostly toothless and the arc as a whole just comes across as fighting for fighting's sake, like the comic is going through the motions. Now, does this mean the Mega Man 2 adaptation is bad? Nah. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is that Flynn's moment-to-moment writing is super solid. It's just a rapid-fire barrage of one-liners, punny humor, and striking action, all punctuated by the fantastic art from Ben Bates, who gives this entire arc a rounder, more chibi-esque style that I absolutely love. Additionally, those light robots from the first arc have stuck around, getting a bit of development as a goofy group of brothers who care a lot about Mega Man. So when they now have to fight to save him from Wily's reprogramming, yeah, that's a nice moment. A very direct way to show that Mega Man's actions have helped make the world a better place by allowing more heroic machines like him to exist. Meanwhile, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Quickman, a wily robot who's willing to bend a few rules to have his glorious fight with Mega Man. He shows up consistently throughout the arc, filling the role of a rival character, but also helping Mega Man out to keep him from getting completely destroyed during his battles because he needs to be the one to win. Quickman really carries this arc hard, and by its end, he was a character I definitely wanted to see more of. Plus, throughout both these stories, there's a certain vibe to the whole thing that kept it enjoyable, even if I had some pretty fundamental issues with how the second game's story is presented here. I could just feel the creators' love for the source material, or at least their genuine efforts to make this as engaging as possible for the fans. A huge part of this comes down to the art. Patrick Spaziante, the regular cover artist for both this and the Sonic comic, had actually already worked on the Dreamwave Mega Man series in the early 2000s. You can tell he really wanted to make this series appealing to fans because he is a fan. And man, it is appealing. As always, his art is super detailed and dynamic, with dense but readable paneling that always accentuates and elevates the action. While I might have found these various 2-page battles a bit disappointing, the art does a lot to remedy that, squeezing as much excitement as possible out of just a couple pages through his multi-layered art. Really, there are times when the presentation is exceptionally creative and endearing. Then there's Matt Herms, whose coloring is absolutely integral to the comic. See, he handles the vast majority of colors from here, and his mastery of lighting, shading, and contrast, the way he gives each blast and explosion oomph and weight as they bathe the page in light, yeah, his work is always a joy to experience. He adds a certain grit to this world, much like his Archie Sonic stuff, bringing this beautiful sci-fi universe to life. One of the most impressive things about the art is just how consistent it is. Outside of a handful of issues that dip a bit below the usual bar, it always looks great, which is particularly impressive considering how many different pencilers work on this comic across its entire run. I'm sure part of why it looks so consistent comes down to Herms' colors, but even so, while individual artist styles certainly shine through, I rarely got that feeling of, oh, someone else is drawing this? And then needing to adjust to the new art style. Now, the comic is just various flavors of great, and honestly, it's one of the most consistently impressive comics visually that I've ever experienced. So, with all that being said, my feelings on this comic were pretty darn positive at this point. With its fantastic art, snappy dialogue, and some solid character beats, it kept me fairly entertained throughout. However, I will say none of the arcs had quite hooked me yet, you know? Like, I was happy to keep reading and I was enjoying my time well enough, but I was waiting for something that would take this story to the next level. And that's exactly what I got with the comic's 4th arc, Spiritus Ex Machina. Now, if you're someone who's read the comic, you might have noticed that I skipped an entire arc. Yeah, between 1 and 2, they adapted Mega Man Powered Up. And there's a pretty simple reason why I skipped it. It didn't really do much for me. The conflict between Mega Man, Wily, and some robot masters felt pretty flat, offering little insight into the bots Mega Man had saved. However, there was one thing about it that stood out. One relatively small character I found pretty darn intriguing. Gilbert D. Stern. See, Stern is a federal agent who's very skeptical about this weird advanced robotics stuff. He also has his doubts that Wily taking over the Robot Masters was the big accident it was made out to be, believing that Light might just have something to do with it. And though his feelings toward Light and Mega Man clearly softened by the end of the arc, he definitely doesn't lose his concern about these almost human but not quite robots. And while it would have been very easy for Flynn to write him like a deranged lunatic who can't see past his own biases, I appreciate how his position is actually given the time of day. Sure, the comic is about how Dr. Light's robotic creations make the world a better place, but Wily is right there. This guy has the right to be concerned, the right to worry that things are moving too quick, that Light is going too far doing what he can instead of thinking about if he should. And so Spiritus Ex Machina takes these ideas and runs with them, crafting an entire storyline around the potential problems with Light's style of robotics. See, Light, Rock, and Roll have all made their way to the Advanced Robotics Trade Show, where Light will be debating about advanced artificial intelligence. Most surprisingly of all though, the person debating against Light is one of his colleagues, Dr. Lalonde, a woman whose own Robot Master Tempo has been acting a bit distant and cold. However, as the debate is just ramping up, another group forces their way into the conflict. The Emerald Spears, extremists who want to entirely erase these AIs from existence and have hidden bombs throughout the venue, primed to explode only once all the people have escaped. As for the Robot Masters, well, they'll be buried beneath the rubble, destroyed and discarded. The first step in the Emerald Spears quest. And what I appreciate is how, once again, Flynn shows his strength at writing multiple sides of a conflict. Because despite the Emerald Spears clearly going about this the wrong way, he really gives legitimacy to their position. Heck, the Emerald Spears leader actually does not want to hurt any people, and believes he can simply debate these doctors who created the machines he hates until they agree with him. Meanwhile, as Lalonde is forced to question her own position, she reveals the real reason she's adopted this anti-AI stance. Tempo, who she had once built to be her daughter, was nearly destroyed. And Lalonde, in her grief, unable to bear the thought of nearly losing her again, erased her personality, making her into nothing more than a tool. It's a great way to make all this more abstract, philosophical stuff hit harder on a personal level, as we watch Tempo flatly assess and react to this conflict. All the dialogue here hits, giving each perspective room to breathe, never feeling patronizing or overly simple in how it tackles this debate. For an action-adventure comic marketed towards kids, this is pretty ballsy stuff. And then there's my absolute favorite part of this story, Xander Payne, its main villain. Where everyone else is happy to debate their differences, Xander Payne is prepared to get his hands dirty. In a group of extremists, he is by far the most extreme, going so far as to knock out their own leader and assume control when he becomes convinced this guy doesn't have what it takes. He provides a startling, entertaining contrast to the other characters, clearly driven by something far more personal. No matter how much others try to show him that things have gone too far or offer him the chance to back down, Xander Payne has the exact same response. Whatever it takes. And what drives him to do all this? Well, in the second issue of the comic, as the original Robot Masters were running wild, a couple soldiers spotted Mega Man, contemplating whether or not they should attack. And as we see now, one of these soldiers also saw Rockman hurting civilians, causing destruction, and Xander, ever motivated and heroic, rushed in to stop him. However, in the face of this advanced, weaponized AI, he was nothing, and Rockman incapacitated him with ease and took his eye in the process. So, while Xander was knocked out, his eye was replaced with a robotic implant, an implant that now only reminds him of the monster that took his eye from him in the first place. I love this. Though it hadn't really stood out in my mind as a major complaint, the Robot Master attack hadn't been given as much emphasis as I would have liked. I mean, we're told they cause mass destruction, but it's not like we actually see anything that makes us feel the weight of what happened. But now we have Xander as a stand-in for the long-term effects of Wily's villainy. Whenever he does anything, the reader is reminded that this is what a misuse of light's technology or robotics can lead to. A man who once bravely charged into a battle he couldn't win, only left a broken, rambling villain. From here, it would have been so easy for Flynn to make Xander the stand-in for robophobia, simplifying the entire debate about AIs into a one-sided conflict with a clear hero and villain. But instead, he crafts multiple pillars, multiple nuanced takes on whether these robots should be able to feel, be able to do so many things. And each and every one of their perspectives is given ample time to be fleshed out. And it doesn't stop there either. In one of my favorite Xander appearances, he gets shot forward into the future, into the world of Mega Man X. Here, he sees more powerful robots than ever causing mayhem, but he also sees that the Emerald Spears, they still exist. However, coming face to face with his deepest fear, seeing so much time transpire in mere moments, it's left him mad. Which is just such a cool idea. I mean, using the Mega Man X plotline to embolden this villain, but also show how, in some ways, he's kind of right. Because though Light's creations will lead to even more advancements and greater possibilities, they also lead to destruction and war, to humans becoming outdated and weaker. The exact type of future people like Xander and Stern predicted. However, at this point, you might have a pretty reasonable question. Where's Mega Man? I mean, this is my favorite arc so far, and I've barely mentioned him. And, well, that's because he's, not doing that much. Don't get me wrong, he's here, saving people, doing everything he can to stop the Emerald Spears, and the same goes for Roll. But they definitely aren't at the center of the conflict, and instead mostly serve as an action-focused B story, a contrast to the A story's more philosophical tilt. And it definitely keeps the pace of the arc moving at a steady clip. And yet, in the long run, I wouldn't really be able to call that a good thing. I mean, a comic being better when its titular character gets less focus, yeah, that's fine for a bit, but I'm not sure how long that'll work. After all, people are presumably coming here for Mega Man, at least to a certain extent. So that left me wondering what Flynn would do to punch up these characters, to take this comic to the next level. And fortunately, he's about to do just that. When I first read this comic, there was one major problem I had with it. The relationship between Light, Rock, and Roll. Yeah, as much as I enjoyed this scene, that's their biggest moment in the first 4 arcs. In fact, we don't see that much of them interacting, and this is the comic's most central relationship. We almost never watch them live as a normal family. We don't get a proper idea of what their day-to-day life is like before Wily so brutally disrupts it. As such, it often felt like we were gesturing toward a relationship more than actually showing the specifics of why I should get invested in this trio. Now, I still want to make something clear. I like Rock well enough. I have from the start. He's an earnest boy with a heart of gold, forced into a fight he never would have asked for, desperately trying to save every robot master he can because he truly believes that they can all change for the better. Meanwhile, though there hasn't been nearly as much time devoted to it as I would have liked, his relationship with Dr. Light is always pleasant when it does get focus. It also helps that, by and large, Light himself is just a very well-defined character, particularly from the Spiritus Ex Machina arc onward. Unfortunately, though, that doesn't change the fact that I needed more. And the character who suffers the most from this? Roll. Really, up until now, I can only think of a couple sibling-esque moments between her and Rock. For the most part, Roll's positive traits are exactly the same as Mega Man's. She's brave and kind-hearted, someone who likely would have taken up this fight if Rock hadn't volunteered first. Her biggest difference is that she's a bit firmer than him, I guess? Stricter? Yeah, she doesn't have much to make her feel distinct from Rock, and despite appearing consistently, I found myself waiting for a moment where I would truly be able to latch onto and understand her character, which is where the comic's 22nd issue comes into play. See, Iceman's got a little crush on Roll, and he wants to confess his feelings with a grand sculpture. However, Roll is entirely clueless, unable to comprehend what he's even getting at, and instead comes to her own conclusion about this Arctic area. Yes, this is romantic, and that means they should hook up Tempo and her brother. After all, Dr. Lalonde only recently gave Tempo her feelings back so she could use some romance, and look, aren't they adorable together? From here, the issue is just ridiculous. Iceman is absolutely crushed, constantly failing across the entire story. Rock's earnest demeanor leads to him genuinely considering his sister's ludicrous desires, even if it takes him quite a while to even pick up what she's putting down. Tempo is just kind of stressed out by the whole thing, far too busy sorting through her other new emotions to even give this idea serious thought. And Roll is hilarious. She's so over the top and sassy and annoyed that no one else understands just how cute they are together. And that more aggressive side, it's the exact sort of thing I've been looking for. That bit of spice that can not only make her more distinct, but also bring additional emotions and funny sibling banter out between her and Rock. Now, I'm sure some find this more slice of life story a bit too low stakes, but that's part of what I like about it. Because now I've gotten a look at more of this family's status quo, at who they are when they aren't fighting Wily or saving civilians from danger. This is how they act. This is their dynamic. And it instantly made me care about rock and roll far more than I did before. Meanwhile, alongside all of this, Light debates with Stern about the ethics and nature of giving robots the ability to love when they happen to run into each other while out for Valentine's Day dinners, giving us better insight into how he views his family and his creations. Altogether, it's great. However, that's not all we've got, because there's another character who's going to bring even more out of this family, a character who represents some of Flynn's very best writing. Before Rock, there was Blues, Dr. Light's very first robot master from back when he was still working on military contracts. As such, unlike Rock and Roll, Blues was created to be both a son and a weapon. So sure, Light trotted out Blues for military tests, but he also showed him culture and art and nature, the beauty of the world. But unlike other robots, Blues didn't stop at viewing that world. No, he became a participant, an active creator all his own. I love this scene. Blues' innocent cluelessness to how big of a moment this is, contrasted with Light's reaction. This mixture of pride and maybe even just a bit of concern, as Blues reveals himself to be so much more than even he had anticipated. And yet Blues is still a machine, still a weapon, still something that can break down. And what makes this relationship between Blues and Light so interesting to me is how Light fails Blues. No matter how much he cares for him as a son, he also still sees him as a machine, as his creation. And he is all too quick to put his will over Blues's. So when he and Wily argue like an old married couple about how they're going to go about fixing Blues's failing power core, one person's opinion is clearly ignored, Blues's. See, as an independent machine, Blues now has his own wants and desires, and along with them, fears. He's afraid of his own death, afraid that Light's tinkering will alter his memory, or that Light might even purposefully change something about him to meet his own ends. So he runs, leaving Light behind before he can make any modifications or fix his broken body. This is already great. Not only does it make Blues a compelling character, it also makes Mega Man and Light's relationship more interesting by contrasting it with Light's prior failures. Because now Light weaponizing Rock isn't just sad in a more general way. I mean, what kind of loving father would want to weaponize their own son? No, now it's specific. A potential repeat of the terrible things that happened when he didn't separate out robots made to be family and robots made to be weapons. So his support of Rock and Roll, those loving moments they share, now this isn't simply who Light is. It's a representation of his growth, of his regret over how he handled things with Blues. From here, we follow Blues as he goes to travel the world on his own, and after learning that there aren't any other robots like him out there right now, he comes to his own conclusion. He's better off alone. He'll live a quiet life using minimal power output until his core breaks down. If he does that, he should be able to survive for quite some time, shouldn't he? And yet, over and over again, when he sees people in danger, he can't stop himself from helping. Even if it means this mortality he feared so much will catch up to him quicker, this is simply who he is. And that tragic basis of his character, it adds so much to him, gives him that something extra I've been looking for from a character in this comic. Because for all of Mega Man's heroics, This is far more compelling to me. Every person he saves is one step closer to his own demise, and that just makes his heroism hit way harder. So finally, Blues' corrupt power core catches up to him as he rests among nature, among the beauty Dr. Light showed him, and a bluebird, similar to one from back then, lands on his foot, reminding him of all they did together, of the type of man his father was, and he realizes just how foolish he's been, which is fantastic. Honestly, one of my only complaints would have been how quick Blues was to run away from Light, and that it's prompted by something of a misunderstanding. But now, closer to his own death than ever before, Blues has a change of heart that feels real. He thought he was ready to die on his own terms, but he's not. He didn't give his father enough of a chance. As he says himself, I was a fool. So he rushes back to his father toward another chance, toward I was a fool. With this in Blues' mind, his fears that his creator viewed him as something that could be replaced or improved are confirmed. After all, two new robots stand in his place, hugging his father, taking his world from him. And he can't face that. He can't bear it. So he wanders away once again, this time to a rumored machine graveyard where he can be alone and where no one else will find him, where he can finally go out on his terms in his way. Because that was what his father never saw about him, that he is his own person. But someone's been hiding out here for some time while Mega Man dealt with the Emerald Spears. Dr. Wily, whose new robot masters quickly find Blues, and so he's finally able to do what Light wouldn't let him all those years ago. He fixes his power core. He brings Light's boy back. He gives the Mega Man comic the antagonist it's desperately needed, Brakeman. Because while I've always really liked Dr. Wily here, I can't say he ever felt like Mega Man's villain, as weird as that sounds. Sure, Mega Man had to fight him, but Wily's deeper conflict is with Dr. Light, the man he feels so inferior to. But now Mega Man has someone to face off against, a character who sees Rock as a representation of all the ways his father failed him, who can't look past him because his very existence enrages him. One of my favorite scenes in the comic has to be here, when Brakeman goes to talk with Tempo. After all, Tempo still lives with the mother who did exactly what Brakeman feared Light would. She reprogrammed her, changed who she was. Once again, Flynn's writing shines. Brakeman's position is given the time and weight it needs because, well, he's right. Lalonde did betray Tempo, and Tempo has needed to deal with that pain, with the fear that not only will she die again, but that her mother will reprogram her. And yet each of Brakeman's questions, each of his concerns, are met with the same response from Tempo, a quiet forgiveness. She toyed with who you are. You can't just forgive someone for that. I can, and I have, because I want to move forward. I can't change what has happened. Dr. Light did nothing to you. Is the problem that you cannot forgive him for nothing? He replaced me! And so now Brakeman is on a collision course with that replacement. A replacement who, regardless of anything he does, will always want to protect his brother, who maybe even wasn't a replacement at all, but instead, one of two siblings who would make sure their brother never felt so alone again. But only time will tell whether Blues will be able to see that or not. Then there's Rock, who wants to save all of these robots, and who now has a far more personal brother to face off against, while his terrified father watches on in horror. That right there is the kind of deeper conflict that will only serve to make Mega Man more compelling too. And sure enough, it does. Every time Mega Man and Brakeman interact, it's great, pulling out loads of emotion. Because much like Rock, Blues has a good heart. We saw that much with all the people he saved. That part of him has simply been corrupted by fear, leading him to make horrible mistake after horrible mistake. And yet, at the same time, He will do the right thing. He will help. He will regret when things go too far. That constant push and pull from Brakeman, his inability to commit to a course of action, it makes him incredibly compelling and unpredictable. One of those characters who always steals the show when he appears. So, that about covers the first half of the comic. Everything that happens before the first Sonic crossover. Of course, I jumped a bit ahead sometimes, and there are a few one-off issues I skimmed over. Like this girl power story where Roll saves a bunch of people from a sinking ship, despite not being as superpowered as Mega Man. That one's fine enough, and it does its job of giving Roll more time in the spotlight, even if it is basic in its execution. Then there's this New Year's one that develops Stern a bit more by directly contrasting him with the Emerald Spears, which is also a solid time. Really, there's only been one outright bad issue so far, this anniversary story, Rock of Ages. Unless you're a big Mega Man fan, this is nigh incomprehensible. Basically, Rock keeps getting sent forward more and more in time, eventually meeting up with Base, and they have to stop this time anomaly or something, and future Mega Man is there. I don't know, man. Overall though, the first half of this comic has been a really good time. Stories like Spiritus Ex Machina and Prototype and the Valentine's Day issue more than make up for the rare less than stellar stories. And fortunately, this comic is only going to continue to get better, quickly going from good to truly great. This following story arc, Blackout, The Curse of Ra Moon, is the perfect example of how much this series has grown in just its first 2 years. While the main conflict is still 4 issues long, it's surrounded by a prelude and epilogue, multiple issues of build-up, and several more dealing with the aftermath. Really, I'd call this the comic's first big event, a story that dramatically shakes up the status quo, placing many of these characters in new and more interesting positions. And by giving this arc room to breathe, by giving these conflicts extra emphasis and taking the time to dig into the characters' emotions more, it addresses all of my previous pacing problems. Right away, this plot begins lighthearted and positive. It's Mega Man's birthday, and to celebrate all the good he's done, the mayor's even gonna rename the city to Mega City. Meanwhile, some of the other robot masters are trying to figure out what the heck to get their bro for his birthday, before realizing the ceremony's starting in just 5 minutes, so gift card? Gift card. This is contrasted by Wily and Blues, who watch as both of their rivals get all the praise and publicity. So Wily manipulates Blues, getting him to crash the party while he deals with some other plans. However, Ra Moon, the mysterious alien thing Wily has been working with in the background since Spiritus Ex Machina, finally takes control. While at the same time, Brakeman fights Mega Man, with Light watching on in horror, revealing this other robot master's identity to Roll. That's their brother, his first son. And so Roll tries to take matters into her own hands and stop the battle. But Roll! And, of course, it's right at this moment, with this ill-timed shot, that Ra Moon's plan is finally revealed. See, this alien creature has the ability to turn off all technology that isn't its own. So it strikes, bringing the world to a screeching halt, and freezing Mega Man in place as he tries to protect his sister. Much of what I've praised about this comic so far has come down to its optimistic message and attitude, the wholesome interactions or characters' general likability as we watch Light's ideals play out. But all that work that went into building up these characters before the crossover, Roll's proactiveness and spunky attitude, Brakeman's bitter jealousy, Mega Man's heroism, the mystery of Ra Moon, it all pays off in this one masterful rapid-fire scene where all these pieces collide at the most dramatic moment possible. It's a real showcase of Flynn's ability that he's able to bring together all these elements in a way that doesn't feel mechanical. And finally, Flynn gives this the weight it needs by highlighting the true darkness and destruction of what's happened here, showcased perfectly with the issue's final page. As Brakeman looks out on the destroyed city, the only robot left standing with a powered-down Mega Man and a heavily damaged Roll caused by his own anger, a stark contrast when he first looked out on the world he was ready to explore. It is incredibly well done. This is literally the first issue following the crossover, and the entire series has basically done every single thing I hoped it eventually would. So, where are we going to go from here? Well, we're gonna go for the comic's best Mega Man-centric plot yet. because now I have that deeper reason to care. Sure, I want to see him stop the blackout so he can save the world at large, but after his bond with Roll got developed in the Valentine's Day issue, well, I want to see him save her, too. See, he and a few of the other Robot Masters have been given a biological-based coating that allows them to fight against Ra Moon. But it will only last so long, and more importantly, it can't help them rescue Roll. If they don't work fast enough to get the world's technology back online, she will die. So Mega Man is put in this terrible position, where he needs to try and uncover what even happened here, and eventually work with Blues, with the one who did this to his sister in the first place. After his fantastic two-part story got me totally invested in his side of things, this is an awesome follow-up, as Blue so clearly regrets what he did, while at the same time, he can't quite let go of his grudge against Rock. And the fact that Mega Man is still willingly working with him, that his good heart still keeps him focused on saving the world, well, that's the type of test of his ideals I wanted to see. Because now I know how strong these convictions are, how far Mega Man will go to save everyone, and that only makes him more likable to me. All of this leads to these moments. Panels showing the Robot Masters protecting the world, armed with their biological coating, and it's here that Light's ideals are rendered in their most powerful form yet. Because though this disaster was only made possible because of Wily and the world's reliance on technology, it is still Light's work that helps save countless lives. So yes, the likes of Stern and Xander Payne are right when they say these machines are dangerous. But even so, if they weren't built with their advanced AIs, if Light hadn't worked on them with such optimism, would they be able to truly save the world at a moment like this? However, for all my praise of this stuff, there's something even better. Another piece of this plot that truly takes it to the next level. See, much like the first three arcs, Blackout is actually an adaptation. This time of a Japanese exclusive FMV game called Super Adventure Rockman, which I wouldn't have even known if not for my co-writer Hollie telling me. Because this doesn't really feel like the game adaptations that came before. It just doesn't have the same predictable structure. At first, I thought maybe that actually stemmed from the game itself being more story-focused, but Flynn basically takes the premise and some characters and does his own thing entirely. He highlights the after effects of Ra Moon's attack, actually showing how terrifying this would be. He gives a deeper reason why Roll is out of commission and in need of saving. He takes the basic bones of the story and builds something I by far prefer. And most importantly, he has Ra Moon's betrayal happen much earlier than in the game, allowing him to get more actual time in the spotlight, giving him further presence as a villain, and completely supplanting Wily's usual role. Which brings me to the man himself, Dr. Wily. From the beginning, this comic's rendition of Dr. Wily has been super fun. A through and through evil and entertaining villain. There's never any real sense that he could become a better person or do good, which makes a lot of sense. After all, he is the main villain of the series. However, now that Wily's lost his usual place in the story, Flynn uses this as an opportunity to do something interesting. See, throughout Blackout, Wily is exceptionally amusing as he slowly loses his mind while hiding from Ra Moon. It's his first time getting major focus while not being the central antagonist of the arc, and it reveals a side of his character we've never seen before, a man on the very edge of his sanity. But still, he holds on to his genius, continuing to create weapons that could destroy Ra Moon. In particular, the artists absolutely nail it here, truly selling his desperation and fear, and yet how, through it all, he still remains prideful, sure that he can somehow fight back. Even though, of course, he can't. So, by the end of the arc, the stakes are higher than ever before, with Mega Man and those who are loyal to Wily forced to fight a new line of robot masters and even Ra Thor, the weapon that was meant to destroy Ra Moon. So, in order to defeat such a fearsome foe, Mega Man must put all his power into his Mega Busters. But there's one problem with this. It won't just break Ra Moon. It will break him. And for a moment, Wily's pride seems to vanish, as he's left genuinely shocked and maybe even touched that Rock would go this far to save him. So Rock charges forward the same as he always has, only asking one thing from Wily. But surely it's all a front, right? Rock is left unconscious in Wily's care, vulnerable, so ready to be tampered with. I love this moment. It's a true subversion of expectations. Without a doubt, I thought that Wily would try and change Mega Man for his own ends, and yet, he doesn't. Regardless of any other scheme he has in mind, he's jumped past the one that made the most sense. Because even as he works with Light to bring Mega Man fully back, Wily hasn't done anything to Rock. He could have changed his memories. He could have done some subtle reprogramming. And yet, this boy saved his life, saved the world. And it seems like maybe, just maybe, this has somehow moved him. It's such an unexpectedly human moment for Wily. And now that he's done this, past scenes with him take on a different flavor too. Like here, when Wily comforts Light after Blues runs away. On my first read, I assumed that this was just Wily manipulating Light, but after this, there's potential. Because now he's a man capable of the good Dr. Light so desperately wants to see in him. It turns this one-note evil villain into a tragic character. One where I know he, as the series' main villain, will backpedal. But I still hope for a different outcome all the same. And sure enough, his plan is soon revealed. He returned with Mega Man to gain trust. Trust that he would ultimately betray. But there is one thing he didn't expect. One fact he didn't account for. It's too easy. Because Dr. Light just believes him fully, without hesitation. Not only that, but he fights for his freedom, for his right to work in robotics again, protecting him from the police. Wily brought him back his boy, and Light won't let that go unnoticed. Meanwhile, Mega Man was there, saw Wily try to fight Raw Moon, and so he's going to stand up for him too. Despite all the wrong Wily has done, Light believes in him so completely that it shocks Wily. Of course, he had hoped for something like this, but when it's so easy, when his supposed nemesis is so quick to show him his greatest invention, what then? Without a doubt, this is one of the comic's best scenes. Just a masterclass in character writing and tension. That moment where time freezes, where Wily is told that everything is going according to plan and he looks truly conflicted. Man, the art is integral here. It's such a perfect way to punctuate that. Wily is getting exactly what he wanted. Respect. But the gears are already turning. The plan is already in motion. And can Wily bring himself to stop it? On the other side of this, Dr. Light. Frozen in time, that good-hearted smile on his face, this softness and understanding radiating off him. It's a true credit to Flynn's writing that Light's optimism has never felt unbelievable or frustrating. It's just honest and pure. This relationship between him and Wily has always been compelling, but this right here, it represents one of the most powerful depictions of the comic's premise, of the complicated relationship between these two geniuses. And yet, despite being given almost everything he wanted, Wily still just can't let go of that terrible pride. This whole section takes Wily from a good villain to a phenomenal one, the perfect foil to Light and Rock's good-hearted nature. Because now we know that, no matter how much they believe there is good in everyone, this man will be here to prove them wrong. But of course, Light can't see that. And finally, the same good heart he programmed into Mega Man is going to come back to bite him. I'll be okay, so long as you two are fine. I am not fine. I am a fool, a naive, gullible fool! I just handed the most powerful piece of machinery in the world to a madman completely devoid of any scruples. But what else could I do? I couldn't let him hurt my children. I already lost one to him. I can't lose any more. No, I'll just lose my robot masters, and Gamma, and my designs, and my hopes, my dreams, and the world can pay the price. He was my friend. I trusted him, because there is good in everyone, isn't there? Am I that deluded? Dr. Light's reaction to Wily's inevitable betrayal is so real, because of all the time devoted to the slow build-up and the expertly crafted dialogue. It's made clear that this isn't just Light's friend betraying him, even though that alone would be bad enough. This is Light's family torn apart. This is his worldview shattered. Really, at the end of the day, this is what the entire comic has been about. Dr. Light's optimistic ideals being tested by a world that is far crueler than him. On one hand, there's Mega Man and Roll, his beloved children, shining examples of the beauty of robotics and the potential therein. On the other hand, though, there's Wily and those like him. There are machines that can go out of control. There's a brave boy sent out to save the world once again. Throughout the second half of this comic, Rock really comes into his own. Following his near-death experience, he's thrust into conflict after conflict that test his ideals and convictions. He advocates for Wily, even though he knows that's risky and we know that's a disaster waiting to happen. He goes into battle, but now with a new fear of his own death. He fights Blues regardless of how badly he wants to save his brother. And eventually, he battles another line of robot masters, as Flynn finally adapts Mega Man 3. Now, at first, I worried that this would represent a step back for the comic. After all, we're once again returning to that gameplay structure, where Mega Man must fight Robot Master after Robot Master. It would be very easy for this to feel too similar to the prior mainline game adaptations. And yet, it doesn't. Sure, it's still got plenty of similarities, but Flynn hasn't forgotten what came before, and uses all these issues of build-up and character moments to totally change the tone of these fights. See, each and every one of these robot masters gives us a quick snapshot of their perspective, of the things that fuel them in these fights. For some, that's as simple as wanting to be a better predator, while for others, it's far more personal. However, in every case, the fight ends not with snappy one-liners or evil monologues, but with the robot masters either accepting Mega Man as their better, or coming to terms with their demise, getting this moment of clarity about who they are. However, it's not just their ability to learn and introspect that makes them feel more human. It's their relationship to each other, because these robot masters have spent more time together and have developed a brotherly bond, gaining a greater sense of duty as they fight not only for themselves or for Wily, but for their fellow bots. For example, Shadow Man. Shadow Man hasn't even been truly programmed to follow Wily. Instead, he chose to of his own volition. Why? Well, because he was once tasked with protecting Ra Moon. However, after failing in that quest, he fled from the other robot masters, trying to escape his own destruction. But then they found him and they reached out, asking him to join. He could have another master, another duty. So he took that offer, and now he will not allow himself to be a failure. Then there's Sparkman. Out of this entire line, he spends the most time thinking about his brothers. And before Mega Man finds him, he's terrified. Mega Man already beat all them. Why would he be any different? But then he thinks about the times they've shared, those little moments of connection and kindness. So he begins this fight with an anger and rage we haven't seen from any other robot master, gunning not just to defeat Mega Man, but for revenge. And yet, at the end of the day, he isn't some monster. He's just an upset, sad guy who wants to spend more time with his brothers. All of this is such a great way to build on the comic's themes and conflicts, because changing the robot master's corruption from full-on mind control into something more nuanced and integrating it into their personalities more, it makes them feel human. After all, they can learn and grow. However, they still don't have that final piece they need. Free will. The choice to go against their directives. And by highlighting their similarities to people, by rendering them more human, this conflict is only made more relatable to me and more tragic and disturbing for Mega Man. And yet Mega Man pushes forward, reminding himself again and again that once all of this is over, they can take their chip data, rebuild them, and program out Wily's influence. Which leads us to one of the comic's best stories, Prisoners of War. Here, the recently defeated robot masters are brought back, and now that they've been reprogrammed, they'll be able to live a normal life. Except, there's one problem with that. To them, this isn't normal. Back during the Mega Man 2 adaptation, I briefly highlighted one character from that arc, Quickman. Where the other robot masters fought Mega Man due to their programming, Quickman truly just wanted his grand fight with Mega Man, wanted to prove he was the superior bot. And now he's one of the robot masters who has been rebuilt. However, he doesn't want to stop fighting. He likes combat. So being reduced to a worker robot? No, screw that. He would rather die. As for his brothers, well, many of them agree. They like who they are. They don't want this new purpose Mega Man has been so hyper-focused on. And so, despite his best efforts in all the fighting, Mega Man needs to face his toughest lesson of all, the same lesson his father only recently learned. Some people just don't want to change. This whole story represents a huge part of what makes Flynn's writing on the Mega Man comic so consistently impressive and entertaining to me. He never gives the characters an easy out, and he keeps challenging them on the core ideals and themes of the series so that Mega Man and Light's position never feels cheap. It's something they have to hold on to in the face of adversity, in the face of creations or people who can't be controlled. But the comic also never pushes it too far. Never leaves me feeling like Mega Man or Light are simply naive. Because we see how the robot masters help. We see how they make the world a better place. We see the love between all these family members and those who are willing to change, no matter how far gone they seem to be. After returning his brother to his family, Blues does what he always has in times of trouble. He isolates himself, sitting alone. However, soon enough, Wily summons him and gives him his next orders. This time, he wants Blues to kidnap another doctor's daughter, a little girl. And Blues snaps. This was never the point. This isn't who he is. He once shortened his life to help others. Of course he can't break apart a family, not when losing his family was what he feared most. But that's when Wily finally drops the facade that he has even a shred of humanity left in him. Blues' power core is still unstable, but Wily made it nuclear. At any time, he can make it explode, taking not only his life, but the life of all those around him. So, left without a choice, he gets the girl. He brings her to Wily. Throughout the whole comic, Blues has been incredibly wishy-washy, teaming up with Wily, even if we knew he wouldn't commit to this evil path. And yet, he still did that. He still stood by this monster and helped him time and time again. So if he had been allowed that easy out his family wanted to give him, if he'd been able to cut ties with Wily with little to no consequence, I think it would have probably felt a bit cheap. And that's why I love that Blues doesn't get that out, because he has gone too far. His indecision led to this moment. Sure, he never would have wanted to hurt this girl, but it's not as though he's entirely blameless. At the end of the day, he chose to trust Wily. He chose to shoot at Mega Man. He chose to hurt his father. And even if everything kept going further than he wanted, he was still the one who made those choices. But now, he makes another choice. He returns to Tempo, desperate to know the state of his power core. So Lalonde examines him only to find that Wily lied. Yes, his power core is still unstable, but it's not going to hurt anyone else. So Lalonde tells him that he has time now, time to forgive himself, to make good with his father. But, of course, Blues can't do that quite yet, because in yet another moment of foolish weakness, he broke apart a family. And now it's time for him to handle Wily on his own, but no longer as Breakman, that name that Wily gave him, and no longer as Blues, his original name from a father whose love he no longer deserves. No, now he will be Proto Man. But what makes this so compelling to me is that, despite his declaration of a new direction, Proto Man's identity crisis isn't over. Before, I got the impression that the comic was ready to give him back his family, which, yes, that would have been pretty satisfying, but Blues has always been a self-absorbed character, even if he can also be heroic. As such, it only makes sense that, before he can accept his family's love, he would need to accept himself, confront his own demons and the terrible mistakes he's made. So Blues has completed only a piece of his arc, finally understanding that he never should have worked with Wily in the first place, but there's more left to do. Now he needs to face himself. In Mega Man's last fight with Wily, he was seemingly crushed by some rubble, and so Rock believes he's dead, which means that the world no longer needs Mega Man. So Rock watches the robot masters he saved go about their work and fulfill their purpose, and all of them are clearly happy. Really, this is the proof that all that pain Rock went through as Mega Man was worthwhile. But there's just one problem with that. Mega Man has lost his function. Here, Flynn once again shows how good he is at digging deep into these characters, examining the things we've taken for granted about them from a different angle. Because even though this is undoubtedly a change for Rock, doesn't it also just make sense? This is a boy who loves helping people, and as Mega Man, he's only made the world a better place. Sure, he never liked the violence, but he liked the outcome. And now, as he contemplates the purpose of his own existence, he questions himself. Do I have to do what I hate so I can feel fulfilled? But who's going to be the one to pull him out of this? Will it once again be Dr. Light or his sister? No. Instead, it's Fireman, one of the first robot masters he fought, one of the first he saved, and Fireman comforts him. Rock doesn't love fighting, he loves helping. And whether he's Rock or Mega Man, he's still helping people, improving the world, no matter what function he serves. Though Fireman has appeared from time to time in the comic, he's never been a remotely major character. And that's part of why this moment hits for me. It's a wonderful representation of all the good Rock has done. Even in ways he might not have known, even though he can't save everyone, this robot is right here, proving he's correct, lifting him up when he feels down. As Tempo previously said to Dr. Lalonde, we will help fix each other. Once again, it's the story's wonderful optimism shining through, even in its darkest moments. However, there's one more character who has to grapple with their identity. Dr. Light. After all, with Wily's betrayal, Light is forced to question everything about himself. Is his faith in humanity at large misplaced? And if it is, maybe he's wrong about his inventions too. But that's when Rock finally returns home and tells Light that he wants to stop being Mega Man. He doesn't need these weapons or this power, because just like Fireman told him, he still has a purpose right here. And finally, the comic has come full circle. Where before Light needed to comfort Rock to assure him that he is good, now Rock does the same for Light. He shows him that his faith isn't always misplaced. And the proof? The proof is right here.
It never hurts to have a little faith.
But then they get a message. Another one of Light's doctor friends is supposedly sending out 8 of his robot masters to destroy Mega Man, forcing him back into the fray. But now Mega Man isn't depressed as he runs off to fight, because he knows why he does this. This is who he is. This whole second half of the comic, it's done such a phenomenal job of building up this family, these characters and their relationships. Light, Rock, and Roll, I've grown to love their dynamic, and they only seem to get better and better. Actually, the entire comic just keeps improving, and if it keeps up this pace, keeps having this many compelling character moments, as many engaging conflicts, and all this exciting action, it could become a favorite of mine. It could. Yep, this is it, the moment I dreaded. The point where the Mega Man comic comes to its sudden end. There's just one more issue, consisting of visions of the future flashed into Light's head, each of them taking up one full page. There's a wide variety of stuff here beyond the obvious adaptations of the mainline classic games. Others are way more obscure, like some stories that were never even depicted in the games, stories that will now never come to be. And so we land on a more direct version of one of the most recent story's messages. Regardless of all the dangers Dr. Light's ideals and genius could and will lead to, there will always be hope, because at the end of the day, there will always be that embodiment of the good in the world that he created. There will always be Mega Man. This ending makes me feel a lot of conflicting things. On one hand, it's a thematically wonderful send-off to the series, and I'm happy we got to at least see something of Flynn's plans going forward. On the other hand, though, getting this glimpse of them having this great comic cut short here, it sucks. Every time I've reread it, I'm left with this hollow feeling of disappointment, upset that something this great wasn't able to see its story through to the end. Like this next arc. Man, Flynn had done such a great job of putting the pieces in place. This Doctor had appeared multiple times as a more critical force, particularly frustrated with the Light's belief in Wily, and now Wily has kidnapped his daughter. It's just such a natural way to build on Light's conflict and make the stakes higher than ever before. Flynn clearly still had passion for this series, clearly still does have passion for this series. When Udon announced their new Mega Man comic book series, he was publicly messaging them for a chance to work on it, to bring his vision to life. And as it often goes with these franchises, people will likely treat Udon as not an alternate take on the series, but a replacement for the unfinished Archie comics. But at the end of the day, so what? This comic is still here. It's still great. As a standalone story, it's a fascinating light sci-fi series, but as an adaptation, it also succeeds in making me want to explore more of this franchise, to play the wide variety of games. From every angle you can look at it, this is a great series that just exudes passion and care and love from every single artist that worked on it. I barely even talked about these great X backup stories with some of Spaz's best art, or the sheer amount of Easter eggs and references to all over the Mega Man franchise that I never would have been able to notice due to, not being part of the fandom. My co-writer pointed out quite a few to me, but that doesn't even represent the sheer magnitude of visual nods or designs pulled from all over the franchise. But if this Udon comic means that a new generation of fans and creators get to explore their own vision for the series, well, I can't be too upset about that. So yes, I want Archie Mega Man to come back. I want the story to be concluded. But even if it never gets its end, I'm really happy with what we got, and I found it surprisingly satisfactory. Nearly 50 issues of the main story, 2 Sonic crossovers, and a whole bunch of wonderful characters and arcs to enjoy. That's a better run than so many licensed comic books ever manage. Which is really the whole point of this video. Regardless of any outside force, this comic is worth reading. And if you skip the crossovers, which I recommend on your first time through, it's a pretty quick read, just 48 issues. So check it out, because much like Archie Sonic, this comic deserves to be remembered, regardless of what comes next. Hey there everyone, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. As usual, a special thank you to my patrons whose names are scrolling on by, and I also wanted to say thank you to Hollie, who was the co-writer for this video. You can find all of their stuff linked in the description. One of the pieces of music used was also a fan cover of Proto Man's theme by Sebastian Romero. Hopefully I said that right, but you can find it in the description. It was really nice of them to let me use that. So thanks again and have a good one. Bye-bye for now.